event. So that's like 1 second to do that. And then we can always talk about.
And you give me then the power to share screen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but Luis, anyway, thank you very much being part of this and all the other events that we've had. There's a Luis Sore playlist on the channel also with all the various events that you've been part of. So that's been really nice. And of course, you are going to tell us about yourself. But before that, let me just put up the event part of it, because we have to know the conference, of course, started on 18th May, which you did not come for. Ken's birthday celebration. You should have come for that. So we did that. And then, of course, Luis is now going to talk about, it's a long topic for sure, but it was even longer. It was even longer when I cut out some part of it. You know that, Luis. So, of course,
yes.
I just felt, why should we write developing countries? Let's say building leadership consensus capacity to prevent unrest and social conflicts. You said in developing countries. I said, why developing? Everywhere the situations can be the same, developing or not developing. So I cut that out in any case, and it was too long.
Okay, well, it will make sense during the presentation, and yeah, we'll see.
We don't consider. We say all of them are at the same level, whatever. They have the similar issues. So Luis, of course, there's going to be a little break. The conference comes back on the 7th. There's a little break in between. And of course, if there's any other topic that you want to discuss, we can always fix that up. So Luis, it's all about you, the topic, and I can come in if you want me to come in. Otherwise, I'm a spectator who's not on mute.
Okay, well, it's a little long, the presentation, so at the end we can insert all the comments and talk about that. Okay, so should I share screen?
Yes, but you have to tell us about yourself. I'm sure you've got a slide on yourself also.
Yes.
So, yeah, definitely. Luis is organized in that manner. Important thing is that the important work that you're doing, that's the important part.
Okay, let me do this. Okay.
Good, you had the slide up.
Yes, of course. Showing you.
Yeah, let me just also point out that after this, we're doing the same session in Spanish.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And we're going to have a break, right?
Your wish. Look, that has to start exactly at 7:30 India time. This, I'm sure, is not going to end by that time. So there's no break for you.
Okay, let's do this then. Well, of course, I'm with Mediator Vikram, who's leading this resolution revolution. And okay, well, there you go. I'm a former deputy Secretary of Conflict Management with the Prime Minister Office of Peru in 2021, and that's the rest of the bio, so people can look at it whenever they want. But as Vikram knows, I have prior experience prior COVID, our COVID world. So I help communities, government, companies, organizations to deal with conflict more constructively. During pandemic, also wearing our lovely mask, and now we're not wearing that anymore. So I will share with you my journey toward building leadership consensus capacity to prevent unrest and social conflict. So I will give you a little bit of how I end up doing what I'm doing. But I was born in September 25th, 1972. That means that my zodiac sign is Libra, and Libra is the sign of justice, balance, harmony, and the human ability to connect with others. So I believe I was born with some sense of justice. So as a kid, I enjoyed watching Justice League with Superman, Wonder Woman, all amazing heroes, super friends, fighting for justice. Then I grew up watching Star Wars, and I believe in the Force, that mysterious energy field created by life that binds the galaxy together. At the age of 19, I went to law school. I learned that our laws protect our general safety and ensures our rights as citizens against abuses by other people, organizations, and governments itself. We have laws to help provide our general safety and live together peacefully. I also learned about the social contract that says that people live together in society in accordance with an agreement that establishes moral and political rules of behavior. And I learned that Jean-Jacques Rousseau state that he says that the state of nature is relatively peaceful, but a social contract becomes necessary to overcome conflicts that inevitably arise as society grows and individuals become dependent on others to meet their needs. I also learned that in the absence of access to justice, people are unable to have their voice heard, exercise their rights, challenge discrimination, or hold decision makers accountable. So I became an attorney, and while practicing law, I learned that after legal procedures, the court system leaves winners and losers. And we know that there are three ways to deal with conflict in our society. So using power refers to the use of power and forces as leverage to force or coerce someone to do something. So this is power-based approaches. Basically, the exercise of power, which end up with winners and losers, or even losers and losers when this approach resorts to violence. And adjudicating rights, the party seeks to refer to an independent norm with perception of legitimacy to claim what is correct or who's right and who's wrong, and defines who has the right and who doesn't. So this is a right-based approach. And for me, this means that going to court results in winners and losers. And reconciling interests, the parties try to satisfy their needs, concerns, desires, fears, and the things that they really care about or worry about. And this means that reaching mutual gains agreements is the only way to get win-win results. And an effective dispute resolution system suggests that most disputes be handled with an interest-based approach. And as Mandalorian would say, this is the way. We need to deal with conflicts more with an interest-based approach. And if this doesn't work, we can go to the rights-based approach. During my grad studies, I learned about the Trumpian dimensions of conflict that are used to compare and contrast cultures. For instance, universalism and versus particularism sees the extent that a culture is more prone to apply rules and laws as a way of ensuring fairness, in contrast to a culture that looks at the specific of context and looks at who's involved to ensure fairness. So comparison this, it means that universalism, everyone is treated the same and follow the same rules, while in particularism, people are treated differently and have different rules. Contracts are more strict, and in the particularism, contracts are like a loose guidelines. And in universalism, issues are resolved by considering contracts, rules, law, and legal documents. And in particularism, issues are resolved by considering personal relationships. I have learned that in developed countries, people trust in the court system. At least they tend to trust in the court system. But people living in developing countries or underdeveloped countries don't trust their court system. And developing countries and also underdeveloped countries wants to become developed. And one way to do this is welcoming foreign investment, especially in natural resources rich countries like Peru and others. But sometimes when people see foreign investment coming, they may have a sense of fear to potential negative impacts to their ways of living or the places where they live. And this may trigger potential conflicting situations. As humans, when facing conflicting situations, we tend to either fight or fly. And the place for a fair fight to seek self-protection should be the court system. But if people don't trust in the court system and people don't believe they will have a fair process through the court system, they will tend to approach the conflict with the power-based approaches, like rallies and protests. So they will likely go on rallies, protests, or take the streets and roads trying to address their concerns, expecting that the government and their elected officials will defend them or protect them from their fears and address their concerns, needs, hopes, and aspirations. This means that people don't believe in the court system will result to public manifestations of power to address their interests. and perhaps they have not experienced productive negotiations or developed consensus building capacity to address their interests or conflicts through dialogue or interest-based conversations. I have a hypothesis confirmed by my experience working in this dispute resolution field, and this is, if people feel and believe that they can address and satisfy their concerns and interests and achieve positive results through negotiation and dialogue, they will likely try to engage in dialogue first, before resorting to protest, rallies, and other violent ways to address their concerns and interests. So I strongly believe that there's a need to develop leadership consensus building capacity among local communities in developing countries. Therefore, formal and informal leaders of local communities, youth and women, have to be trained not only to prevent conflict, but also to foster conditions to work together and better engage with potential investment projects, developers, towards sustainable development. And this connects with an article I read many years ago. A gentleman connected to the Harvard negotiation project, and the title was, "What? Teach the other side to negotiate better?" And this was framing the labor management negotiations to have better negotiations in which parties can reach win-win solutions or be better off. So I believe that even though the legal system tend to aim for justice, I also believe in the individual capacity of humans to know better what their interests are and how to satisfy them. If this is true, why not teach the other side, local leaders, to negotiate and to have interest-based conversations and constructive dialogue to reach agreement and build consensus? We know what is best for us. People can be empowered to have the capacity to prevent conflicts, engaging with others more constructively to address their concerns, fears, aspirations, and hopes. An endeavor to build consensus capacity among local leaders should include training on reframing our mindset and training on mutual gains approach to negotiations and constructive dialogue skills that equip them with better processes to get better results. We need to know that the fact that you are right does not mean that I'm wrong. And the problem when we engage with others or talk to resolve conflicts or talk about our difference, we tend to jump into conclusions and talk based on positions, and we debate based on our own assumptions. As William Ury says, we are reaction machines with that thinking of I'm right and you're wrong. And we do not make the effort to understand the way we both see or give interpretations to things differently. And our interpretation is always influenced by our own previous experience, our interest, our culture, our assumptions, prejudices, what we assume and believe, and our way of thinking. So I love this picture because this little chicken or hen sees the painting of the animal, and she may think, well, this is how these guys reproduce and grow. And so she gives interpretation to the world based on her own experiences. A key idea in our field is that we can create value on our understanding of multiple and diverse interests. And a fundamental concept is the difference between interests and positions as described by Fisher and Ury in their book of Getting to Yes. So positions is what we demand. Well, what we say we want. And you respond to the question, what? What do you want? That's a position. And interests are all the needs, aspirations, hopes, concerns, wishes, desires, fear, all what make us have a position. And you respond to the question, what for? What do you really care about? What really want? What do you really want? And what's the reason behind and beyond a demand? So it's what we really want to satisfy. So how can we mobilize that dialogue to build consensus to address our fears, concerns, needs, aspirations, and hopes? First, we need to change our thinking. We need to move from blame games, like you are at fault, you are guilty, to thinking like joint problem solving. I win, you lose. We should think on mutual gains. Instead of thinking me against you, is almost always we against the problem. So instead of having face-to-face confrontation, we can work side by side or work collaboratively. So first change our minds, and then we need to change our behaviors and actions. How we can be soft on the people and hard on the problem. So how we can be soft on the people, we act with respect and knowing position, building positive, trusting, working relationships. And how we can be hard on the problem, we need to focus on interest, those needs, concerns, hopes, aspiration, and not on our positions. And basic principles to guide dialogue with a mutual gains approach is that we need to engage the parties in the solution, like seek active participation. It's an exercise of joint problem solving. And we need to focus on what's most important, the interests and the needs of people, and create options that generate mutual gains, meaning the gains are how many interests, how much of these interests we can satisfy, being creative, thinking together. And we always need to act in a way that builds trust and relationships. And I always talk about respect with double T. T of treatment, treat me as equal, and transparency. Like, be honest with me, tell me what you are going to do and do it. Or if you are telling me I will not do that, don't do it. So the first challenge to general mutual gains is moving from positions to an interest, those needs, concerns, etc. And not only we need to understand our interests, but also we need to understand the interests of the other party. So a basic process that we need to move from positions to needs and interests, asking why or what for. Then these interests, we can address them thinking creatively, asking, what if we do this? What if we do that? Creating mutual options. And then we can turn this into agreements using objective criteria, something that goes beyond our naked will. It's not because you want it or because I want it, it's what make it fair. Is there any standard that we can use to kind of divide the pie that we create or divide the value we create? And finally, anticipating challenges in the implementation of our agreements. And after we reach an agreement, we need to think of what might go wrong and what can we do about that. So to have better dialogues, to build consensus, we need to change our frame or our mindset or our thinking to change the game. Let's reframe the game to address our concerns and aspirations more constructively. See the other party as your potential partner to join problem solve to address your challenges dealing with newcomers or investment projects. And let's have interest-based conversations to understand each other's perspectives and work better together or collaborate. And let's think together to devise creative and innovative ideas that address diverse and multiple interests, seeking mutual gains and work toward more sustainable practices. So I strongly believe that we can work together toward peace building, address different challenges with local and foreign investment projects, especially dealing with natural resources projects, and work towards sustainable development. And even we can work together to stop our current climate crisis. So I want to finish with a quote of Jedi Master Yoda that says, "Fear is the path to the dark side. And fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering." And I would add, it also leads to violent conflicts. So why not develop consensus building capacity among local leaders, young people, and women, and equip them with the tools to enhance their capacity to reach creative, smart, and sustainable agreements with mutual gains and work better together to sustainable development. This is a dream, but we can jointly turn it into reality. Who would like to join us? Join Master Vikram and this new force, the resolution revolution. We all can be heroes in this planet Earth, and I want a better place for my kids and for all. Thank you. That's it, my friend Vikram.
Wonderful, Luis, but this is short. We have, you know, that
Sure.
we have lots of time. We have lots of time. The other one is going to be at 7:30.
So I have time for questions.
Exactly. The questions, and I think it's more about now your practical experiences. I think we
Yes.
need to get into that because I mean you've really worked on the ground. So you are differentiating between developing and developed countries in that sense. So working on the ground, what is the difference?
Well, what do you mean the difference? That's what I'm talking about. I mean,
Generally, practically, what your experiences have been.
well, we need to be able to connect with people. That's when we talk about this energy and see the goodness in other people. And we need to be humble, and we need to be genuine, and we need to really care about the other. It's not that this is philanthropy, it's that it's convenient for all if we think um, about the others' well-being. I mean, it's good for me that the others are in a better situation. Yeah, that's my first comment.
Much more to it.
Master Vikram.
Much more has to come out from you, Luis. I'm still trying to dig out from you. Basically, the thing is that there is theory, and there is the actual experience that you had. So experiences that you had various places. So take us through something interesting that happened in relation to. Look, I've heard you. I've heard your. We've done a lot of sessions. So we've done. I mean, we've spoken about the processes and everything. But here, give us some live example of this was what the situation was, and this is what we created. This was how that capacity was created. This whatever. Let's hear some story.
Okay, well, okay, you want a story? I will tell you my story. One of my most lovely stories, the 2018, before COVID. So I was on a family vacation in 2017, and I get a call from a friend and said, "Hey, Luis, I have some leaders from indigenous tribe in Ecuador who are coming to Peru because they want to ask a mining company to return what the company purchased in the past, which was a huge piece of land from this community." And I said, okay, so what's going on with that? Well, we don't know how this conversation is going to happen. So can you please undo some of your magic? And I said, what kind of magic? What are you talking about? Well, can you deliver some one-day joint gains, mutual gains training and negotiation? And the next day we have a deep conversation and we can explain why we cannot return this land, but we can think together in a more enlightening vision for the future, working together, the community and the mining company. And I said, sure. So I came to Peru, and these 10 leaders came, and I met with them, and we do this little training. Interestingly, I plan a training for 8 hours for the content to be delivered in 8 hours, but the limitations of or the language barriers made that difficult. So I could just deliver basic points, which are interest and positions and creating value together. And so at the end, I could deliver the initial 2 hours of the training. And the next day we had this deep conversation. And the company explained to these leaders that the company could not return this piece of land because it was an asset, and this was the value for the company. But the company was interested in fostering some sort of development for the local community. And they wanted to work together, and they got the idea of, well, dialogue is possible, joint problem is possible, and we can work together toward development. So at the end of that meeting, they understood that, But they said, we can now go back to our community saying we don't have the piece of land that we came here to get. So Luis, can you go please to our community to explain to our community what's this thing of dialogue and consensus building and development? And I said, sure. That was November. And in January, I went to the local community. And it was an amazing trip because I came from Lima to Quito, 2 hours flight, 8 hours drive, and then 40 minutes in a little tiny, super tiny little airplane in the middle of the jungle. And I was like praying all the way through because I was like, if this crashes, we are going to all disappear. But anyway, so we got there. I was received kindly by the community. And in my world, a consensus building process starts with a stakeholder assessment to understand what the community really care about, what are the concerns, and what's the conflict from their view. So to me, it was an opportunity to learn more about this community and why they really wanted to get back this piece of land. So we spent 3 days together, living with them, sleeping with them in the jungle. And I heard screams, people crying, a lot of suffering, telling me the story of what they thought or what they saw happening. And at the end, supposedly, the company, through a lawyer, purchased a big piece of land. Some people didn't know what was going on. Other people's, yes, they were thinking what was happening. The money didn't come all the way that they were expecting. So they had a conflict for 11 years. So my role was to help. Well, first I needed to understand what was going on and then share with the company the perspective of this community. And I wanted to know if it was possible to start a dialogue process. And they basically, at the end of our 3 days, I had I helped them write or create a proposal for the company to start a dialogue process and to address all the interests of the parties. But they had one condition, and they said, okay, we can talk, but first give us our land back. They were like, okay, well, this is the message I need to deliver. So I went to talk with the company. I talked with the company, and they said, well, in Peru, we cannot make that call. We cannot make the decision. This needs to be decided by the board of directors in Canada. So I had to go back to the community to explain what was the result of my conversation. I took advantage I saw that as an opportunity to keep digging and understanding their interests. And I also did an exercise called visioning. So I was asking the community, if there was no conflict, or if we could resolve this conflict, how would you like to see your community in the future? And we talk about health and infrastructure and all these things. So at the end of those 3 days too, as well, I went back to the community. We talk more deeply about the potential of a dialogue process. And by the way, the company said, yes, we can have a dialogue process and we can include in the dialogue process the issue of the land. So when I talked with the community insisted, saying, yes, we can have an agreement to do exploration, because the mining company wanted to do some exploration to identify the potential of the subsoil, the mineral and economic potential. So, but the community said, we can do all, but first you need to give us the land back. Okay, so I went back to the company and I explained this to the company in Peru. And then they said, well, maybe we need to go to Canada to talk with the board of directors. And I went to Canada to talk with some individuals, decision makers, also to understand how was the decision-making process of the company, and if it was possible to decide return this piece of land. And the company in Canada didn't know much about what was going on the ground in Ecuador. So they were more curious, and they also said that they wanted to help with the development of the community, and they wanted to do exploration, and they were really open to work together with the community. So I went back to the community. Well, my intent was going back to the community. I went back to Ecuador. I did all the trip, the 8-hour flight, the 2-hour drive. And before getting to the little airport, well, at the door of the airport, I ran into an individual who was a leader of many communities. I was engaging just 2 communities, but I ran the leader of many communities, like a federation of communities. And he said, "Oh, you're the mediator. Good to know you." Well, he didn't say good to know you, but he said, "Who gave you permission to get into my land?" And I was like, "Well, I'm talking with these 2 communities." "Well, but I cannot give you assurance about your safety, and this is not being consulted with the federation, so I don't know what you wanted to do, but I would recommend not to get into the community." And on one side, I have these 2 communities waiting for the response from that I was bringing from Canada, and for the other side, I have this leader, respected leader, who said, "Don't come in." So I had to make a choice. And this is a very structural or hierarchical authority and power. So I thought maybe I should not get in, because I will then exclude this guy. And I thought this guy was important, or this federation was important to be part of this process. So I told him, "Well, I respect your status, and I will not get into the community, but I would like we have a conversation later on, because it's possible that some people come from Canada, and we can have a little conversation about what they wanted to do and how we can address the situation." So a month later, he said, "Okay, we took a picture, we got a picture." He's very serious in that picture. But a guy from Canada came to Ecuador, and we met with this guy and other leaders of this federation. And it was a genuine conversation, and the company said that they just wanted to get into the local community to explain what they wanted to do, and see with their own eyes what's going on with this land issue. So he gave authorization. We got into the community. There was a presentation. People introduced themselves. They did a lot of explanations. And a month later, we have another bigger meeting with this leader of the federation, with the leaders of these 2 communities, and with leaders from other 5 communities, I think. And we agreed that we were going to start a dialogue process in which we were going to jointly evaluate if the company can return the piece of land, what would be the best way to do it. And we follow a process. We create a kind of joint commission, a secretary of this commission, so we can have information going back and forth. And after maybe 4 months, we went together to the government to ask what would be the best way to return this to the community. The company asked to the community if they were willing to receive this piece of land as a donation with no conditioning. So just an act of faith, saying, "I want to heal our relationships, here's our land." And then in November 2018, meaning after 11 months of dialogue, the company and the community, they made a big ceremony, and they signed papers to return this land back to the community. And in December, like the next month, the company present a proposal of a memorandum of understanding to the community to do a joint fact-finding process in order to work together to see the value of the minerals under the ground. And in February, after going back and forth, they signed that agreement. or this memorandum of understanding, and now they are working together on this exploration process, exploration project, and I understand they are having good results of what they are finding, and they are growing, and even at some point of time, even the president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, he was saying that this is the way to do participatory mining, including the communities and not working on their backs. That's a little story, my friend.
That's an interesting story. But tell me, Louis, you worked in various countries.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, of course, okay, indigenous peoples on one side and otherwise also. So what differences do you see in relation to actually practically working with them in different countries first, then we look at whether in terms of the indigenous peoples later. So what in various countries, what is the difference you saw in terms of their outlook towards conflicts in general, and I mean, just the way they approach things?
Well, I would say that mainly people, when we talk about projects, either natural resources, infrastructure, agro industry, there are tangible interests and there are intangible interests, like emotional interest and things important for people. Like people are concerned about the impact on water resources, or negatively impacting the environment. People want to receive benefits of activities that they work on their spaces or where they live. And this is not a simple expression as, oh, they just want money. Because many people say that, even though everybody wants money, but it's also an issue of feeling or having the sense of belonging. So people don't want to be excluded from the activities and benefits that happen in where they live. And there's also an interest or a sense of autonomy. So people don't want to get imposed. They don't want to get decision imposed on them. So people want to have a voice on decisions that will affect them. So yeah, I think the sense of belonging and the sense of autonomy and not feeling excluded are key. So people want to feel appreciated. And that's when I say that we need to be genuine, we need to be sincerely curious to learn about the others, because we need to just care about people. And yeah.
No, but I'm just thinking, like, when, of course, say Ecuador or Peru. Let's just look at two countries. Of course, we would have worked in others.
I
In
talk
terms of,
about this is for all the countries
yeah,
where I
that's what I'm
have
saying.
been.
We're generalizing there, but specifically, do you see differences in relation to each of those countries? If you have to say, I mean, whichever ones you worked on, giving an example, okay, in Ecuador, this is what they were looking at. In Peru, this was maybe different in their approach. I would not know. I mean, you would know, of course, you worked on with that. Did you see differences, or did you see all of them looking at things, I mean, similarly?
Well, the things that I'm sharing are things that I see constantly or repeated in every place I go. Either it's Argentina, it's Peru, is wherever I go. Yeah.
No, because I'm just saying, look, yeah.
So I guess the main difference in the interaction with people, there are people that are more outspoken and people more introverted or have lower self-esteem. And they don't advocate for what they believe is fair for them. But the concerns or the interest and the hopes and aspiration are mainly the same for all the people I get involved with.
Yeah, because I think finally a lot of course, focus is given on culture and all those things. But I just feel that sometimes there is something very basic that you have to get to, and that basic remains quite the same everywhere. So I think touching on the right commonalities or the basics that exist between people, I think that seems to be what, for me, the way it should be looked at, and not try to look at it culturally. I have to look at it differently, because in each group, in the same country, there might be differences, and in different countries it might be the same. So I think that's what I was trying to kind of get at.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that everybody, well, let's see. Individuals are just different. Different individuals are different. But people from specific region, they believe they are different than everybody. So what you do over there, you cannot do over here. Well, yeah, everybody's unique, everybody's beautiful, but the concerns and fears and hopes and aspirations are the same for human beings.
That's the important part. This is exactly what I was trying to get at. In the same way, I'm saying that, of course, I cut out that developing countries part of it. I am saying that we don't need to get into that, because yeah, if you want us to show any differences there in terms of developed and developing, please.
Yeah, the only reason why I try to make the difference between developing countries and underdeveloped countries and developed countries for the other side is because people tend to trust in the court system with the developed countries. So, and in underdeveloped and developing countries don't trust much on the court system. Either there is corruption or, well, there are many reasons they don't trust the court system. So in developed countries, when people feel affected, impacted, they go to the court system because they believe they can get a positive result. But with their underdeveloped and developing countries, they don't go to the court system because they know, or they strongly believe, they will get nothing out of that. So that's why it's more likely that these people go to the streets, rallies, and protests and say, hey, daddy government, help me out here. So that's the only reason why I do that distinction between developed and underdeveloping.
So now what I have to do is I have to work towards getting Luis to understand that it is the same in that sense also. For the court system perspective also, it might be the reverse. I'm telling you, there are certain developing countries where they might have more faith in the courts. And there will be developed countries where we do not have that much faith in the courts, because it's not about the courts only, it's the whole process. And whether they really have they look at that process in the same. I mean, I feel that we should be considering that part. I feel there is still a lot needs to be discussed on that aspect.
Right.
Faith on the
and
court
I'm just
part.
talking based on my experience.
Look at you keep hearing in the US about the Black Lives Matter and everyone on the street doing this or whatever, and the similar other protests come out. I mean, I don't see that as something where there is trust in the system. I don't think there is. And yeah, I'm just thinking.
That's fair, my friend. That's fair. But either way, even if you trust or don't trust in the court system, the best way to address conflicts is through interest-based conversations, or through dialogue or negotiation or consensus building.
But Luis,
it doesn't matter if you trust or not in the government.
Where are my three favorite words? Where is heart, soul, spirituality in the entire? Where does that fit in? After you don't fit that in, I'm not going to go ahead with this.
Yeah, well, that's the human connection. That's how we need to talk, and that's it.
Because did you see a difference there? That is what I want to see. Developed, developing, underdeveloped. Did you see their connection with the heart, soul, spirituality part of it? Is the differences there?
Yeah.
Is there something that you saw there? Differences in that? How that is perceived?
I think that developing, underdeveloped countries are more open to talk about heart, soul, and mind, and the connectiveness of that. In the developed countries, we are busy. We don't talk about these fluffy things, but which is really meaningful, is the real thing, is the force.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, but what you wanted was you wanted a little break before the other session. That's what you wanted to do.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, so, we have like 15 minutes.
Yeah, there is 15 minutes. You want to take a break? We can do that, and then we can start after 15 minutes. So we can close this session. Not a problem at all.
Okay, my friend. So connect in 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
Always a
Take
pleasure
care.
speaking to you. And
Yeah.
I'll get my Spanish in order up till then. Okay, see you.
Muy bien.